Hi guys. Today I want to talk about narratives, at least until the ice is melting. Let me see if I can do it like Squidward. That ends bad. So, one narrative that I told myself is the narrative of being like ugly because I think that the society, especially like the right wing politician side, tells themselves that there's more valuable and less valuable people, and even people that you know should be considered as less valuable because they are more ugly tend to be more right wing because they project that into foreigners, at least in Germany. So the people I perceive as like right wing having this ideology of like Herrenmenschen, like it's a word of the Nazis, where Hitler basically said that there's like people who should like dominate others, steal the resources, and go to the east. I mean, basically what Trump is doing right now. Um, this kind of stuff. This kind of stuff projects like some people as like dominating about others in an in group. But even in that in group, you basically have narratives that will value like better looking people over people that look worse. Um, and this was a narrative I told myself here in Germany a lot because I was left by my girlfriend like 6 years ago. I was betrayed because I got kind of depressed when my mother died. And I also get excluded in groups a lot. Like, I was also not for use anymore for a lot of friends after, and so I was basically just alone. I told myself the story, all right, like, I'm on the scale where I'm like considered a little under average. So that means I'm barely accepted as long as I provide resources and that stuff. But I also have like enough money that I can kind of slack off. So I don't, I don't know. I don't have this kind of working motivation. I don't have the narrative that I fucking fit in society. Um, yeah, but also when I was, for example, making a holiday in the Philippines, I think that I mean I want to say that the people treat each other better in general than here. But I think I was also considered as good looking because I got like multiple offers from women like that. I would go to them, and I mean I just want to assume that they don't want to kill me or steal my pocket or something like that. um oh yeah, the ice is nearly melting, but I have to speak. So yeah, this narrative that I had was kind of dying, and it was like a narrative of yeah, how can I call this? Like maybe cultural relativism also, it's not exactly the word I'm searching for, because it just means that certain phenomena are seen as different in other cultures. Um so yeah, this narrative was like different to me. Another narrative that's or like I mean another thing is there's a self narrative that I tell. And this self narrative is very different of the narrative of the perception of the world. So, for example, my self narrative is like kind of changing and it is kind of sticking to my storyline, and it is just like telling myself that I'm doing a certain thing and that I'm identifying with my own character. But I don't have like a lot of contact to people that are kind of similar to my character, so I don't have an in group narrative. And then there's also like state narratives or group narratives. For example, in my soccer group, like I was coming too late and I was excluded for that. That would never happen to a player who's like either really good looking or like really good. And also, the same happened to my trainer, and like nobody cares because he's doing the fucking narrative, right? And I mean, it's the same with the state and that stuff, right? And like they are just doing narratives, right? So one day it's like, oh, there's the rights of the civilization, the civilizational rights, and then the next day, right, you just kidnap another president, for example. Or we say, or our chancellor said, oh yeah, social democracy is so important, and then they did Cum-Ex, and like they just took 200 billion of taxes that they directly gave to the companies. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, no, nothing makes sense. Like, the whole narratives are basically lies. So, and if we know all the fucking narratives are lies, right? Then why have a self narrative? And yeah, I will probably add to this video, and it's almost done. So, for example, what I wanted to say to the aesthetic narrative, like even people like Nietzsche said that if you kill a butterfly, you are a villain, but if you kill a cockroach, you are a hero. So morals always have an aesthetic category, right? And with the narratives, it's kind of like narratives has to be aesthetic in a certain way, like, oh, for democracy, for the population, like, oh, we are only doing good here in the job. So they have to fulfill a certain kind of aesthetic. But why would they not fulfill the self prophecy, or like the interests of the leaders of those narratives, right? And then I want to ask you, do you have a self narrative? And how did this self narrative change over the time? And as I pointed out, I'm not sure what kind of manipulations I have in my self narrative. Because, for example, I'm like I tell myself that I'm basically slacking off and that I want to slack off if I'm in a position like that. Because I always see that people try to slack off of me, and the system tries that too, of course. So I don't really have a good narrative about myself and don't have a good narrative about others, but I don't see it as bad either, because if they would not do that, obviously someone else would do that. So I don't consider myself as good or bad, and people come over that pretty soon, right? But that also makes myself question if I see myself for what I'm actually doing or how I want to think about myself, because the only things that I could think about now is that I have certain points in my childhood that build my narrative. For example, a certain insecurity in making a bounding, because I was hit, for example, a lot, and in my family, some people betrayed each other even. So, um, so yeah, the ice is nearly melted, and I don't know what to talk about anymore. But I think like the bounding anxieties could be a certain point how people would change their narratives. And the other point is like the game dynamic, because I don't even want to say that I like to slack off. I mean, if I would do something for the community, and I would be guaranteed that the community would treat me well and would give me something back, right? I would not have the narrative of slacking off because everybody wants to get rich. And why do you want to get rich, right? Because you want to get lost of all that shit, right? Like everybody wants to be like a millionaire, and that makes like life miserable because everybody is trying to do any fucking trick, and that gives us a bad dynamic, right? But they only have the narratives that they have to do that they do that for protection, and that is again like game theory, a game theory based phenomena. So yeah, because the ice is melting and I was just doing a spontaneous thing. Thank you for watching, and if you have some thoughts to it, leave it. Goodbye.